The hat was still in his hand when he realized his mistake. Not from my expression. I kept it perfectly still, the way you learn to after 20 years on the bench. He realized it the moment he looked down at the badge on my blouse, just beneath where the hat had been. Then his face did something I've watched 1,000 times in my courtroom. It collapsed, all that practiced confidence folding inward, leaving nothing but the raw, ugly truth of what he'd just done. But to understand why that moment mattered, why it wasn't just an insult but the beginning of the end of everything he thought he'd built, you have to go back to that morning. Back to the coffee I never finished, and the folder on my passenger seat, with his name printed on the cover. My name is Diana Reeves. I've been a judge for 11 years. Before that, 12 years as a prosecutor. Before that, 3 years in the law library at Howard University, where I was the first in my family to earn a degree. I am 52 years old, and I wear my hair natural because I earned that right the hard way. And on cold October mornings I wear a wide-brimmed brown felt hat my mother gave me the year before she died. My clerk Jasmine says it makes me look like somebody's very distinguished great-aunt. I have never minded that. Distinguished is accurate. I worked for every inch of it. That Tuesday started the way my Tuesdays always start. I woke before the alarm at 5:15, made strong coffee in the French press my daughter gave me for my birthday, and drank it standing at the kitchen window, watching the October light come through the oak trees. It was the only 15 minutes of the day that belonged entirely to me. Everything after belonged to the law. I had one heavy case on my docket that week. A misconduct hearing for Sergeant Dale Pruitt, use of excessive force, falsified incident report, 2 prior complaints that had been quietly buried by people who should have known better. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday. I'd spent the better part of the week reading his file, and I had read enough to understand that it would be 2 very unpleasant days. I didn't know yet how badly that word, unpleasant, was going to undersell what was actually coming. I left the house at 7:40 with the Pruitt folder on the passenger seat beside me. There was something about having his name that close that I didn't like, as if the paper itself were contaminated. I pulled on my brown felt hat at the door, locked up, and walked to my car, thinking about nothing more than the dry cleaning I needed to collect on the way home. The farmer's market on Callaway Street runs every Tuesday in October, and I always stop for the Delacroix family's honey and a small sourdough loaf. 6 years, never missed a Tuesday. The air that morning smelled of cold earth and roasted nuts. The light was the specific gold that only arrives in mid-autumn, and I had just paid Mr. Delacroix $7, same as always, and he called me judge even here, off the bench, with the kind of quiet respect that makes you stand a fraction straighter, when I heard a voice from the market entrance, loud, deliberate, a voice performing authority rather than exercising it. "Step aside," it said. I said, "Step aside, ma'am." When I turned, I saw a young woman in a headscarf, maybe 25, holding a flat of eggs, being blocked from the exit by a uniformed officer. He was broad-shouldered, late 30s, with a jaw set like a closed fist, and the posture of a man who has never once been told he was wrong in a way that stuck. His hand was extended toward her, not touching, but close enough that she'd pulled back. Behind her, people watched with the careful stillness of those who've learned that involvement costs more than silence. "Sir, I just need to get through," she said, almost apologetically. That apology made something pull tight beneath my ribs. "I'll tell you when you can get through," he said, with the tone of someone who has rehearsed contempt so many times it has become effortless. "Stand where you are." There was no incident in progress, no call, no complaint, nothing. He was simply using his uniform the way some men use a raised fist, not to accomplish anything, but to watch someone flinch. I walked toward them. Judges don't insert themselves into street situations. I know the rule and I know its reasons. But I have spent 20 years watching what happens when no one with any standing speaks up, and I know the price of that silence too well to keep paying it. I stop 6 feet away and use the voice I use when a courtroom is getting out of hand, the one that fills space without raising volume. Officer, is there a legal basis for detaining this woman? He turned and his eyes moved over me, the way certain men's eyes move over women they've decided don't matter. Quick, dismissive cataloging without seeing. Black woman, coat, hat, briefcase, not young, not deferential, not worth his time. This doesn't concern you, he said. It concerns me if there's no lawful basis for it, I said evenly. Is she being detained? He stepped toward me, closing the space in a way designed to feel like pressure. I didn't move. Lady, he said, dropping his voice to something meant to sound like patience. Move along before this becomes a problem for you, too. I'm not going to do that. What happened next took 2 seconds. He reached out and with 2 fingers, quick and utterly deliberate, he flicked my hat from my head. It wasn't violence, it was something more calculated than violence, a demonstration, a small public humiliation designed to show me and every person watching exactly what he believed I was, and exactly how little consequence he thought I carried. The hat spun once and landed in the dirt between 2 stalls. The man arranging apples stopped mid-reach. Mr. Delacroix, behind me, made a sound in his throat I had never heard from him before. I felt the October air on my hair. I felt every pair of eyes in that section of the market settle on me. And moving through my chest, not hot, not fast, but slow and total, like cold water filling a vessel to the brim, came something I can only describe as absolute clarity. Not anger, not humiliation. Clarity. I bent down and picked up my hat. I took my time with it. I brushed the brim once, then again, and put it back on my head and straightened up and looked at him without saying a word, for long enough that the silence became its own kind of verdict. "What is your name?" I said at last. He smiled. The smile of a man who has never faced a consequence he couldn't charm or force his way past. "Pruitt," he said. "Sergeant Dale Pruitt. You need me to spell it?" The cold water in my chest turned into something else. Something quieter. Something organized around a purpose. "No," I said. "I know exactly how to spell it." I picked up my briefcase, turned, and walked back toward my car at a pace that was neither hurried nor slow. Behind me, I heard him say something to the people watching, something with a laugh wrapped inside it, but his words didn't reach me, because by then I was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere very still and very calm, built around a single thought that felt less like a plan than like a fact that had already happened. Thursday was in 2 days. On Thursday, Sergeant Dale Pruitt was scheduled to appear before me. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I forgot to drink, the Pruitt file open in front of me, going through everything one more time. Not because I needed to. I had it memorized by then, every falsified timestamp and every buried complaint. But because there is a discipline in reviewing a case the night before you step into the room to hear it. You make sure your hands are clean. You make sure that what you're about to do is justice and not something more personal. The tea went cold. The kitchen was quiet. Through the window the oak tree was a black shape against the orange glow of the streetlights, and I looked at it for a long time, and I thought about my mother, and about the hat, and about the young woman with the eggs who had said "sir" in that apologetic voice. I thought about how many times I had used that voice myself, in corridors and traffic stops and rooms where I was the only one of me, back before I understood that deference purchases nothing. I had stopped using that voice a long time ago, but other women were still using it every day, because no one had ever shown them they didn't have to. I closed the file at 2 a.m, washed my mug, went to bed. I lay in the dark and told myself, Tomorrow is just a Thursday. Just a hearing like any other. Do your job. Then I closed my eyes, and after a while, I slept. I dressed carefully on Thursday morning. Navy suit, the one I wear when a case matters. My mother's hat. I made my coffee and drank it standing at the window, but the feeling was different from a normal morning. Not loose and quiet, but taut and precise, like a string tuned exactly right. I picked up the Pruitt folder from the seat when I parked at the courthouse, looked at his name on the tab for a moment, then put it under my arm and walked inside. My clerk Jasmine met me at the door to chambers. She handed me my schedule and the terrible courthouse coffee, and said in the tone she uses when she wants to say something without quite saying it, "Your 9 o'clock is already here. His attorney, too. They've been in the hall for 40 minutes. Good, I said, and went to put on my robe. The hearing room was standard. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent light, no jury box. A dozen people in the gallery, officers from Pruitt's precinct, a civilian oversight board representative, a court reporter, and in the second row, the young woman from the market in her headscarf, who had filed a statement 3 days earlier and whom I had not expected to see in person. When I walked in and took my seat, I did not look at Pruitt immediately. I arranged my papers and let the silence settle into the room. Then I looked at him. He was at the respondent's table in his dress uniform, shoulders back, hands flat on the table, wearing the expression of a man who believes a proceeding is a formality. His attorney, a compact man named Forster, leaned over to say something. Pruitt nodded without listening. He was looking at the bench. He was looking at me. I watched the recognition move across his face in stages, the way a crack moves through ice. First, the slight narrowing of the eyes as something registered as familiar. Then the frown, the reaching for context. Then, the moment he found it, the color left his face starting at the jaw and moving upward, and his hands, which had been flat and still on the table, curled slowly inward without him seeming to notice. His attorney was still talking. Pruitt had stopped hearing him entirely. "We are here in the matter of misconduct charges filed against Sergeant Dale Pruitt of the 8th Precinct," I said, in the same voice I had used at the market on Tuesday. Calm, level, filling the room without effort. "Counsel, is your client prepared to proceed?" Forster stood. "Your Honor, my client believes there may be a conflict of interest with the presiding judge, given a prior—" "Mr. Forster," I said, "I reported Tuesday's incident to the presiding judge's administrative office on Tuesday afternoon. I was advised that the incident involved no pending litigation, occurred in a public space, and constitutes potential evidence relevant to the pattern of conduct under review. There is no conflict requiring recusal. Do you have a written motion ready to file?" He did not. Pruitt, I suspected, had not told him anything about Tuesday until approximately 4 minutes ago. Forster sat back down and said something low and rapid to his client. Pruitt answered briefly. Whatever he said, it did not improve Forster's expression. "Then we proceed," I said. What followed was 3 hours of testimony, and the slow, methodical dismantling of a man who had believed himself untouchable. 2 buried complaints. I had requested the originals from precinct records on Tuesday evening. Came in as exhibits. Both had been filed by black residents. Both had been marked resolved. No action required within 48 hours. No investigation. Signed off by the same supervising lieutenant. That lieutenant was present in the gallery. He arrived looking bored and left looking as if something had gone badly wrong in his stomach. The falsified use of force report was the centerpiece. Pruitt had documented a subject from the previous February as actively resisting at the moment force was applied. Security footage obtained by the Oversight Board investigator, Sandra Okafor, one of the most thorough people I have encountered in this work, showed the subject with his hands raised and his back against a wall for 11 full seconds before Pruitt moved. 11 seconds is a long time when every one of them is on camera. Forster argued the angle was misleading. Okafor produced a second angle from a traffic camera across the intersection. It was, if anything, worse for his client. Forster tried everything he had. Procedure, context, the wear and pressure of difficult police work. Throughout it all, Pruitt sat at the table with his jaw set and his hands flat, and occasionally he looked at me with an expression that had traveled well past shock and anger, and arrived somewhere that looked almost like pleading. I gave him nothing back. Not coldness, not triumph, not sympathy. Just attention. The undecorated attention that a judge owes every person who appears in her courtroom, regardless of what she may know about them, regardless of what they may have done to her on a Tuesday morning in a farmer's market when they believed there would be no consequences. Near the end of the afternoon, Forster said his client wished to make a personal statement. I allowed it. Pruitt stood. He looked at me, and his voice, when it came, had something cracked open beneath its surface, something that had been solid and load-bearing and was no longer. Your Honor, if there was ever any impression that I— He stopped. Tried again. I didn't know who you were. The court reporter's fingers rested above the keys. The room held its breath. I know, I said. That is the whole point, Sergeant. I closed his badge and pension 2 weeks later in a 4-page written order I drafted twice and revised once and am not ashamed of. The lieutenant who had signed off on the buried complaints was referred to the district attorney's office for review of his own conduct. Forster filed no appeal. I heard through the courthouse grapevine that Pruitt went back to the Calloway Street market about a month later. I don't know what he was looking for. A normal morning, maybe, or a place that didn't yet know his name. Mr. Delacroix, who has been selling honey at that market for 16 years and misses very little, recognized him. He didn't say anything charged or particular. He just told him the honey was sold out that day. Sold out, come back next week. Pruitt didn't come back. I still go on Tuesdays. I still buy the $7 honey and the small sourdough loaf. The brown felt hat goes on at my front door. Same hook, same motion, same October cold air at my collar. And when I settle it on my head and feel the brim level above my eyes, it feels, if this makes any sense, more like my mother's than it did before, as if something was tested against it and the hat held, and now it weighs more. The way things weigh more when they've been defended. I finished my coffee this past Tuesday standing at the kitchen window, watching the bare oak branches in the pale December light, and I thought about all the things you can try to take from a person in 2 seconds, with 2 fingers and a smirk. And I thought about the things you cannot. The things built in 20 years of early mornings and late nights, and a law library, and a mother who handed you a hat and said, "Hold your head up. You belong everywhere you go." That was never his to reach for. It never will be.